Scooby-Doo, 1969, 10 scenes that are now banned. Scooby-Doo was supposed to be harmless Saturday morning fun, but some scenes were so scary, so offensive, or so outdated that they have been banned. From racist stereotypes and offensive slurs to nightmare fuel that terrified an entire generation, these are 10 Scooby-Doo moments that got yanked from reruns. Number 10. What a night for a night. Picture this in your head for a moment. It is a cold and quiet night in the American countryside. The moon is hanging low and yellow in the sky, half hidden behind a curtain of clouds. A thick white fog is rolling in from every direction, creeping between the trees like something alive. And through that fog, something strange is walking. It is a suit of armor, a big and heavy suit of old iron armor, and it is moving all on its own 2 metal feet. No one is inside of it. No one is holding it up from behind. It just walks. Step, 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 the hollow sound of metal boots on wet grass, the clang of a chest plate rocking back and forth. Kids sat cross-legged on the living room carpet with bowls of cereal in their laps, and their little eyes went wide as saucers. That was the very first thing kids ever saw when they turned on Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? This episode was called What a Night for a Night, and it aired way back on September 13th, 1969. It was the pilot. It was the one that had to hook the kids. It was the one that had to prove to the whole world that a Saturday morning show about a talking Great Dane, a smart girl in orange knee socks, a pretty redhead in a purple dress, a handsome guy in an ascot, and a hungry hippie in a green shirt could actually work. This one first episode had the job of setting up everything the world would come to know and love about the Mystery Machine Gang. But here's the thing that most people do not know about that first episode. Before this pilot ever hit the small screens in family living rooms all across the United States of America, it almost did not air at all, not even once. The big executives at the CBS TV network took a long, hard look at what the creators over at Hanna-Barbera had put together, and they got scared. Not scared in the way that little kids might get scared. They got scared for the little kids. They got scared for their advertising money. They got scared for the moms and dads who might pick up the phone and call in to complain. The whole look and the whole feel of that early Scooby-Doo was very different from what most fans remember today. The colors were darker and heavier. The shadows were longer and stretched out weird across the walls. The monsters looked meaner and more real. The forest scenes were full of twisted black trees and low-hanging branches that looked like grabbing hands. Fog was everywhere. Fog was in the yard. Fog was around the mansion. Fog was even inside the museum rooms where the gang went snooping around. And the music, oh brother, the music was creepy in a way that many folks said just did not belong on a kid's cartoon show. It sounded more like something from a real horror movie playing at the local drive-in than a fun cartoon meant for little ones eating cereal. Network people started asking hard questions all around the meeting room table. Would little kids cry themselves to sleep after watching this stuff? Would parents flood the switchboard with angry phone calls the next Monday morning? Would this whole scary show hurt the good, clean name of the CBS network? Some of the higher-up bosses even suggested that the whole thing should be pulled from the schedule and reworked from top to bottom before it ever got a single chance to breathe on live television. That is just how close Scooby-Doo came to being nothing but another rejected pitch that nobody today would have ever heard about. The Black Knight villain himself is the exact thing that set off all the alarm bells. He shows up in the very first minutes of the show. The gang has been over at the malt shop grabbing burgers when the Mystery Machine breaks down on a lonely stretch of country road. They wander off looking for help, and they end up wandering right into a spooky museum full of old armor and old paintings. And that is when the armor comes to life. The visor slams down. The sword lifts up on its own. The whole heavy metal suit takes one big lumbering step toward the camera. Shaggy screams. Scooby jumps into Shaggy's arms. Kids across America drop their spoons into their cereal bowls. And in one house after another, moms poked their heads out from the kitchen to see what was going on. That kind of scare on a Saturday morning cartoon just was not normal in 1969. Cartoons back then were meant to be Bugs Bunny hijinks and Tom chasing Jerry around a kitchen, not walking suits of dead men's armor stalking teenagers through a foggy museum. The scariest part of the whole pilot is the chase scene through the dark hallways of that museum. There are shots where you only see the shadow of the Black Knight. You only hear his metal boots on the wooden floor. Clang, clang, clang. His shadow gets longer and taller against the wall as he comes around the corner. His helmet slowly turns like it is looking right at the kids watching at home. In one part, he backs Shaggy and Scooby into a corner near an old grandfather clock. He raises his heavy iron sword high above his head. And for a second, just 1 second, the whole thing looks less like a cartoon and more like a real scary movie. That single second was the shot that had the CBS suits sweating in their office chairs. That was the shot that almost killed Scooby-Doo before it even got started. Modern parenting websites still bring up this pilot when they warn parents about which classic cartoons might be too much for very little kids. Some blog posts have called it the darkest and creepiest Scooby-Doo episode ever made in the entire long history of the show. The mood is heavy, the jokes are fewer, the laughs feel forced. The whole thing plays out more like a spooky mystery movie than the goofy monster of the week fun that Scooby-Doo would become famous for. That is why this pilot rarely gets picked as the sample episode when you see Scooby-Doo advertised on streaming platforms today. The bosses know that if you use this one to sell a new kid on the show, that kid might get too scared to keep watching, and a scared kid does not stick around to see episode 2. There's also a little known behind-the-scenes story about how the creators had to soften the whole show. After this pilot went out, they cranked up the music to be more silly. They put in more laugh moments with Scooby chomping down on a giant sandwich. They made Shaggy's voice sound goofier and higher pitched. They changed the design of the monsters going forward so they had softer edges and sillier faces. They knew they had made something that skirted the line of being too scary for the target audience, so they walked it back. And the show we all know and love today is really the result of that walk back. After this one dangerous first pilot episode, without the panic over what a night for a night, the Scooby-Doo we know might have been a whole different show. Today, this episode still airs from time to time on streaming platforms and on some of the older cable channels, but every so often it gets skipped over in the automatic playlists. Every so often a parent watching along with their kid will lean forward and say, "Wait a minute, is this really a kid's show?" And every so often, an entire episode gets quietly left off of streaming reruns because the bosses have decided that maybe this one is a little too much for the very youngest fans in the audience. So while it is not officially banned anywhere in the world, this pilot episode has slowly become the one that streaming services quietly hide from the front page. That is what they call a soft ban. And Scooby-Doo's very first outing is the very first Scooby-Doo scene to get one. But if you thought a walking suit of armor was where the trouble started, oh brother, you have not seen anything yet. Because coming up at number 9, we are heading into a haunted mansion, where a group of teenagers get locked in overnight, where green ghost phantoms fly out of walls, and where an inheritance scheme turns into something that had parents writing angry letters to the network for weeks after it aired. Number 9. A night of fright is no delight. Now imagine this scene playing out on your TV set. A big old mansion sits at the top of a lonely hill. The sky above it is full of dark rolling storm clouds. Lightning cracks down and lights up the whole face of the house for just a split second. In that split second, you can see rows and rows of black windows staring down at you. You can see a big front door that looks like the entrance to a tomb. You can see stone gargoyles perched up on the corners of the roof with their mouths open, ready to scream. And inside of that mansion, 5 young people are about to spend the scariest night of their whole lives. This one is called A Night of Fright is No Delight. It comes from the first season of the original Scooby-Doo show. It aired on December 6th, 1969, just a few months after the pilot lit up the airwaves for the very first time. And of all the early episodes, this is the one that many old-school Scooby-Doo fans still remember, as the one that gave them real nightmares as little kids. Not fun cartoon monster nightmares. Real. Wake up screaming in the middle of the night. Run to mom and dad's bed nightmares. The whole story kicks off in a way that sounds like something out of an old classic horror movie. A very rich old man has passed away. He left behind a huge fortune of $1 million. That kind of money in the 1960s was more like $10 million in today's kind of money. And in his will, the old man laid out one very strange rule. Anyone who wants a slice of his fortune has to spend one whole night at his haunted mansion up on the hill. Just one night, from sundown to sunrise. But nobody who has ever tried it has ever made it through. Not one single person. Every heir who has tried to spend the night has vanished into thin air by morning, never to be seen or heard from again. The gang, of course, gets pulled into this mess because Scooby is one of the heirs mentioned in the will. That already sounds silly. And it is. But the tone of the episode after that goofy setup takes a hard turn into pure spooky horror. As the gang steps through the big creaky front door of the mansion, the lights flicker overhead. The floorboards groan under their feet. A cold wind blows down the long empty hallway, even though there are no windows open. And that is when the green phantoms start showing up. Ghost after ghost after ghost. They come out of walls. They rise up through the floor. They slide down from the ceiling. They chase the gang through room after room after room. Green was the whole color scheme of this episode. Green ghosts, green fog, green lights flashing through the halls, green flames flickering in the fireplaces. And the reason the ghosts were green was because the animators wanted them to look like something that had died a long time ago and come back from the grave to walk again. That green color was chosen on purpose to remind the viewers of dead flesh and moldy old corpses. That is a heavy design choice for a Saturday morning cartoon show meant for children as young as 5 or 6 years old. And that is exactly why parents were so upset when this episode first aired on nationwide television. The chase scenes in this one go on for a long time. There is a bit where Daphne gets separated from the rest of the gang and finds herself in a dark hallway all by herself. The camera follows her from behind, and you can hear her heavy breathing as she looks over her shoulder into the dark. A green phantom starts drifting down the hallway toward her. She turns to run, but she trips. She falls. She scrambles to her feet. She keeps running, but no matter how fast she runs, the phantom keeps drifting after her. Silent as smoke, faster and faster. And when Daphne finally turns to look, the phantom is right on top of her, its mouth open in a silent scream, its long ghost fingers reaching out for her purple dress. The scariest part of the whole episode is the moment when the gang splits up to explore the house. Freddy tells everyone that they should split up so they can cover more ground, which is the exact line that Scooby-Doo would become famous for saying in every future episode. But in this one, when they split up, things get really dark really fast. Velma finds herself locked inside a small closet, with green ghost fingers scratching at the door from the outside. Shaggy and Scooby end up in a suit of armor room, where every single knight in the room starts to slowly turn its head to look at them. And in one really unsettling moment, the camera cuts to a portrait of the dead old man hanging on the wall, and his painted eyes slowly slide from one side to the other, following the gang as they walk past. Parental guide websites today still list this episode as one that parents of very little kids should be careful about. The chase scenes are longer than usual. The music is heavier and more full of low booming notes. The green color of the phantoms feels wrong in a way that little kids sometimes cannot even put into words. And the whole idea of a bunch of teenagers getting locked inside a haunted mansion overnight, all alone with no adults to help them, was too much for some of the youngest members of the audience. Some viewers today have said that this is the episode that made them scared of their own attic or basement for years afterward. The inheritance scheme angle is also kind of dark for a kids show. The whole point of the story is that someone is going around murdering the heirs one by one to make sure that they never get their share of the money. That is a real-world crime story. That is the kind of plot you would see on a grown-up cop show, not a Saturday morning cartoon with a talking dog. In the actual episode, the gang finds out that the killer has been stashing the missing heirs somewhere in the house. And when they finally figure out where, they open a door and find all the missing people tied up and gagged in a hidden room. That reveal of finding real live human bodies tied up and gagged was another moment that had parents writing complaint letters to the network. The episode also features a lot of physical peril for the gang. Daphne almost falls through a trap door in the floor. Fred nearly gets crushed by a giant swinging chandelier. Velma almost gets crushed by a big heavy bookcase that tips over on its own. And Shaggy and Scooby, of course, almost get chomped by every scary green ghost that shows up. All of that adds up to a lot of near-death moments in one single half-hour show. And by the end of it, little kids were sweating on the living room carpet, gripping their pillows tight, wondering if the show would ever cut to a happy ending. There is also a very famous scene in this episode that has been talked about for years and years on classic cartoon message boards. It is the scene where the gang discovers that the mansion is full of hidden passages behind sliding walls. One by one, the gang members disappear behind the walls as the walls quietly slide shut. The scene is shot in a way that makes it feel like the mansion itself is eating them alive one bite at a time. Some fans have called it the scariest single shot in the whole first season of Scooby-Doo. Others have said it is the moment that made them realize this show was not just for baby kids. Modern streaming platforms have not officially pulled A Night of Fright is no delight from the library. It still shows up in the season 1 lineup on most platforms where you can watch the original show, but it does get flagged as one of the darker episodes, and some parental guide services have suggested that parents watch it first before letting their little ones sit down for it. That is a rare warning for a Scooby-Doo episode. Most of them get rated as fine for all ages, but this one has that quiet asterisk next to it. That little warning tag that says, maybe you should think twice before pressing play on this one. The Green Phantom design has been reused in many later Scooby-Doo shows and movies over the past few decades. But every single time the animators bring back a Green Phantom, they always make it look sillier and less scary than the ones from this original episode. The eyes are bigger and rounder. The bodies are less see-through. The mouths look more like cartoon frowns than screaming corpses. That softening of the design over the years is another quiet sign that the original Phantoms from this episode were just a little too much for what a kid's cartoon is supposed to be. But if a haunted mansion full of green ghost phantoms and locked doors and hidden passages was scary enough to give kids nightmares, wait until you hear about number 8, because coming up next, we are trading the Haunted Mansion for an amusement park and the Ghost Phantoms for a great big robot that goes rogue on a fun family day out. And this time, the danger is not just spooky, it is metal. It is fast, and it does not stop for anyone. Number 8. Fall play in Funland. Think about your favorite childhood memory of an amusement park. The smell of hot dogs and popcorn drifting through the air. The sound of a carousel calliope playing that same happy tune over and over again. The bright lights of the Ferris wheel spinning against the evening sky. The screams and laughs of families having the best day of their whole summer. Now take all of those happy memories and imagine that in the middle of that fun family day, the biggest robot in the whole park suddenly turns his glowing eyes on you and starts to walk your way. That is exactly what happens in the Scooby-Doo episode called Foul Play in Funland. This one comes from the first season of the original show, and it first aired on November 1st, 1969. That was just a couple of months after the pilot. And this episode is the moment when the show really started to lean into a whole new kind of fear. Not ghosts, not phantoms, not walking suits of armor. This time, the fear was mechanical. This time, the fear was made out of steel and wires and blinking colored lights. This time, the fear was a robot. And back in 1969, robots on television were something that could really unsettle a young viewer. The setup is simple enough on paper. The gang has stopped by an old amusement park that has closed down for the season. The park is called Funland, and it used to be a favorite spot for kids and families in the local area. But recently, the park has been shut down because strange things have been happening after hours. Rides start themselves up in the middle of the night with no one at the controls. Lights flicker on and off. Music plays out of nowhere. And in the middle of the park, a big robot named Charlie has been seen wandering around all on his own, doing things that no one programmed him to do. Charlie the robot is not your friendly R2-D2 kind of robot. He is a big, tall, boxy metal man with 2 glowing eyes, a wide mechanical mouth, and heavy metal arms that end in clamp-like hands. He looks more like the kind of thing you would see in an old black and white science fiction movie about a machine that turns on its human masters. When Charlie shows up in the episode, he does not smile. He does not wave hello. He does not do a fun little dance. He just walks slowly and heavily toward whoever is in front of him. And he raises those clamp hands, and he tries to grab. The scene that people still talk about all these years later is the bumper car scene. Velma, of all people, gets stuck inside a bumper car that has started up all on its own. The bumper car is zooming around the ring with no driver, spinning her around in tight circles, slamming her against the padded walls of the ring. Velma is being tossed around like a rag doll, her glasses sliding down her nose, her arms flying up in the air. And in the middle of all of that chaos, Charlie the robot climbs into the bumper car ring, walks slowly across the metal floor, and starts to close in on Velma, while she is still trapped in the runaway car. That is a lot for a Saturday morning cartoon. That is a big robot chasing a young teenage girl who cannot escape because she is trapped in a machine. That is a scene where the villain is closing in slowly while the hero cannot move. That is the kind of thing you would see in a scary grown-up movie, and it made a lot of kids at home really nervous. Some kids never wanted to ride a bumper car at the state fair after seeing that scene. Some kids started to look at every carnival worker as a possible bad guy in a robot suit. Some kids had bad dreams about big metal hands closing in on them in the dark. The whole episode is full of moments like this. There is a bit where the Ferris wheel starts up on its own with Fred stuck on the highest seat. The wheel spins faster and faster, tossing Fred around, and he almost falls off from the very top. There is a bit where Shaggy and Scooby get onto a runaway roller coaster train, and the whole ride has been sabotaged, so the tracks lead straight off the edge of a broken bridge. There is a bit where Daphne almost gets crushed by a giant swinging pendulum ride that has been rigged to hit her. And through all of these bits, Charlie the robot keeps showing up, glowing eyes, and all walking slowly toward whoever the ride is trying to hurt. The theme underneath all of this is a very grown-up theme. It is the theme of technology turning against the people who built it. It is the theme of machines that were meant for fun, becoming machines that hurt and kill. In 1969, this was a real fear that was floating around in the culture. Grown-ups were reading books and watching movies about computers and robots getting too smart and too powerful. There were newspaper articles about factory machines that had crushed workers. There were stories on the evening news about assembly line robots that had gone wrong. This episode of Scooby-Doo took all of that grown-up fear and put it into a Saturday morning cartoon for little kids. Some cultural critics who have looked back at the original Scooby-Doo series have pointed to foul play in Funland as one of the darker episodes. That would probably not fly today in the same form. Not because of the way it looks, not because of any language, but because of the level of physical danger that the gang is put in throughout the episode. Almost every member of the group has at least one near-death moment. Almost every ride in the park becomes a weapon, and the villain in the robot suit uses actual force to try to hurt the kids, not just to scare them. That kind of straight-up violence is rare, even in the original Scooby-Doo, and it stands out as one of the moments where the show pushed the boundary the hardest. The design of Charlie the robot has also been talked about a lot in modern reviews of the classic show. Charlie looks like the kind of monster that a real little kid might be scared of. If they saw him at a real amusement park, he is tall, he is silent, he has glowing red eyes, and his metal face has no real expression on it. That kind of design of a face that shows no feelings is called an uncanny robot design in the world of cartoon art. It is a design choice that psychologists say can make even grown-up viewers feel uneasy. And when you put that kind of design into a kid's cartoon, some little kids just cannot handle it. They cry, they hide behind the couch, they ask their parents to please turn the channel to something else. There is also a great big theme in this episode about how nothing is as fun as it seems. The amusement park was supposed to be a place of joy and family memories, but under the surface, the whole place has been turned into a trap. Every ride has been rigged. Every attraction is dangerous. Every corner hides a robot with clamp hands. And that message, that even the happiest places in life can be dangerous, is another grown-up idea that snuck its way into what was supposed to be a fun Saturday morning show for children. Some critics have said this is the episode where Scooby-Doo tricked kids into thinking about how the world is not always safe. The chase scenes in this one are also longer and more intense than in some of the other early episodes. There is a running gag where Shaggy and Scooby try to hide inside various funhouse rooms, and every single funhouse room turns out to be another trap. They hide in a hall of mirrors, and the mirrors start moving to squeeze them. They hide in a funhouse tunnel, and the tunnel starts to shake and rattle like an earthquake. They hide inside a giant clown head prop, and the giant clown head starts to bite down. Each hide-and-seek moment ends with another close call. Another almost got them. Another second where the danger felt very real. Parents and grandparents who watched this episode when it first aired have posted on classic cartoon forums that this was the one that had them writing angry letters to the network. Some folks thought the level of danger was just too much for the target audience. Some folks thought that showing a young girl trapped in a runaway ride while a robot closed in on her was just plain wrong for a Saturday morning slot. Some folks worried that kids would be scared to ever go to a real amusement park again after watching this show. And while none of those complaints were enough to get the episode pulled from the air back then, they did shape the way the show would handle danger in later episodes going forward. Foul Play in Funland is still available on most streaming platforms today. It has not been officially banned in any market, but when you look at the average parental guide rating for this episode, it always comes back a little higher than the average Scooby-Doo episode. It sits in that same soft ban category where the show is technically fine, but where parents are gently warned to preview it first before they let their little ones watch. And a lot of streaming platforms have quietly stopped using this one as a sample or preview episode when they are trying to sell new fans on the classic show. But if a rogue robot in a shut-down amusement park is not enough for you, hold on to your seat. Because coming up next, at number 7, we are trading the funhouse for a movie studio, and the villain is not a phantom or a robot. This time, the villain is a rampaging ape man, and the way that this episode plays with the word ape has raised more than a few eyebrows in recent years. Number 7. Never ape an ape man. There is a certain kind of horror that comes from watching a movie set. Big cameras that stare at you like glass eyes, long shadows that fall from painted plywood walls, fake trees and cardboard mountains that suddenly do not look so fake anymore. The kind of place where the line between what is pretend and what is real starts to get a little bit blurry, and where you begin to wonder if maybe, just maybe, that thing over there in the corner might actually be moving on its own. That is exactly the kind of place that the Mystery Machine rolls up to in the episode called Never Ape an Ape Man. This one is from the first season of the original Scooby-Doo series, and it hit the airwaves on October 25th, 1969. The whole story takes place on a big movie studio lot out in the middle of the California desert. A famous film director is trying to finish shooting a new jungle adventure movie, and the star of the movie is a big, hairy, snarling ape man in a rubber suit. But someone or something has been sneaking around the set at night, wrecking props, scaring the actors, and knocking over expensive cameras. And the last time anyone saw the Ape Man costume, it was hanging up on a rack backstage. Now the Ape Man is walking around all on his own, tearing through the sound stages, chasing anyone who gets too close. The gang shows up on the movie lot because the director has called them in to figure out who is doing all the damage. And within about 5 minutes of setting foot on the studio grounds, they run smack into the rampaging ape man himself. He is huge. He is hairy from head to toe. His teeth are yellow and sharp and long. His eyes are little red beads sunk deep into his furry face. And when he lets out his big, loud jungle roar, the whole soundstage shakes, and Shaggy and Scooby go flying up into the rafters like a couple of scared cats. Now here's the part where the trouble starts. The whole episode is stuffed full of what the writers thought were funny puns about apes. There are ape jokes in almost every scene. Shaggy makes ape face gestures. Scooby scratches his head like an ape. There are lines about going ape, going bananas, and monkeying around, all packed together, one after another, like the writers could not resist. And in a couple of moments, the human characters make direct comparisons between themselves and apes, or between other people they know and apes, in ways that today just do not read the same way they did back in 1969. The word ape has a long and heavy history when it comes to how people have used it to talk about other human beings. For a very long time, in America and in other countries around the world, calling a person an ape has been used as a nasty way to put down and dehumanize entire groups of people, especially in the 20th century. There were ugly newspaper cartoons and racist advertisements and cruel jokes that used the word ape to compare certain people to animals in a hurtful way. Today, most grown-ups know this history. Most grown-ups know that using ape language toward other human beings is not funny and not okay. But in 1969, that history was still fresh, and the writers on Scooby-Doo either did not think about it or did not care. The moment in the episode that has raised the most eyebrows in modern reviews is a scene where one of the human characters gets a face full of dirt after tripping over a camera cable. As he wipes the dirt off his cheeks, another character laughs and makes a comment comparing him to the ape man. The whole rest of the crew laughs along. Nobody in the scene calls it out or pushes back. It is played as a light little joke, a quick little laugh line before the story moves on. But today, watching that scene back with all the history that everybody now knows, that scene lands differently. It lands hard, and it is one of the reasons why some parental guide websites have started to flag this episode with a warning tag. There is another moment in the episode where the ape man himself is treated less like a monster and more like a big joke. When he corners Shaggy and Scooby in a prop room full of jungle plants, he lets out a big roar and starts pounding his chest. The camera zooms in on his face for a long, slow shot, and his features are drawn in a way that some modern critics have said feels really uncomfortable to watch today. The heavy brow, the big lips, the wide, flat nose. The whole face is drawn in a style that some folks say uses old racist cartoon shortcuts to make the ape man look scary. Those shortcuts were common in a lot of American cartoons from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and they show up in this Scooby-Doo episode too, whether or not the artists meant to include them. The chase scenes in this one are also a little bit different from the other episodes of the season. Instead of running through a haunted mansion or a foggy museum, the gang gets chased through fake movie sets. They run through a cardboard African jungle. They run through a plywood safari camp. They run past painted backdrops of pyramids and elephants and lions. Every single one of those sets is filled with the same kind of old racist adventure movie tropes that Hollywood used to lean on for decades. Grass skirts, tribal masks, bone necklaces, big pots meant for cooking people over open fires. All of those images flash by in the background as the gang runs by. And to a modern viewer, seeing all of that stuff on a Saturday morning cartoon is a lot to take in. The villain in the ape man suit turns out to be, of course, a normal person in a rubber costume. That is how every Scooby-Doo episode ends. But the reveal of who is under the mask in this one carries some extra weight. The bad guy turns out to be a rival director who was trying to shut down the movie so he could take over the project. That plot twist is fine on its own, but the fact that the whole episode has been played as a series of racist jokes and dated adventure movie cliches means that the whole story leaves a bad taste in the mouth. It is not just the ape man that feels wrong, it is the whole world of the movie that the gang has walked into. Modern cartoon writers who have been asked to look back at this episode have said that it is a good example of how humor can go bad over time. The jokes that seemed fine to a 1969 audience just do not work anymore. The comparisons that felt lighthearted back then feel mean-spirited today. The imagery that was normal in old adventure movies looks straight up racist now. And the whole tone of the episode of a bunch of white teenagers laughing their way through a jungle-themed movie set feels like a moment that would never get made today. Streaming platforms have not officially pulled Never Ape and Ape Man from their libraries. It is still there in most versions of the original Scooby-Doo series. But some editors and cartoon historians have started to suggest that the episode should either be pulled from rotation or should be aired with some kind of warning card at the start. The kind of warning card that plays before some old Warner Brothers cartoons, where a voice comes on and says that the following show reflects the values of its time and may contain content that is now considered wrong. Scooby-Doo does not have that kind of warning yet on this episode, but there is a growing chorus of voices in the world of classic animation asking for one to be added. The bigger question that this episode raises is a question about how we should treat old cartoons that have racist jokes baked into them. Some folks say we should just leave the old shows alone and let people watch them the way they were made. Some folks say we should add warning cards and let the audience make up their own minds. Some folks say the worst episodes should just be pulled from the library and put in a vault where nobody ever has to see them again. There is no easy answer, and different people fall on different sides of the fight. But Never Ape and Ape Man is one of the episodes that keeps coming up in that big grown-up conversation. It is one of the episodes that people point to when they say that Scooby-Doo has some hidden trouble in its history that most fans never realize is there. The episode also has a strange little Easter egg that some fans have picked up on over the years. The name of the fictional movie being filmed within the episode is meant to sound like a real jungle adventure film from that era. And if you compare the name of the fictional film to some of the actual jungle adventure films that were being made in Hollywood in the late 1960s, you can see how Scooby-Doo was making fun of that whole style of movie. But by making fun of it, the show also ended up reproducing some of the same racist elements that made those old jungle movies so troubling in the first place. That is the tricky thing about parody. Sometimes when you make fun of something bad, you end up carrying the same bad stuff forward into your own work. And that is a big part of what happened in this Scooby-Doo episode. Fan forums and cartoon message boards have kept the conversation about this episode going for years. Some fans defend it as harmless fun that has been blown out of proportion by modern critics. Other fans say the jokes really were bad, and that the episode should have been better even by the standards of its own time. Still, other fans do not really care one way or the other, and just remember it as one of the middle-of-the-road episodes from the first season. But one thing that almost every fan agrees on is that the Ape Man himself is one of the goofiest looking monsters in the whole original series. So even if you do not love the episode for its story, you might still love it for the sheer silliness of a big rubber ape man stomping around a fake movie set in the middle of the desert. But if you thought a rampaging ape man on a movie lot was the worst that Scooby-Doo could do with a foreign setting, wait until you see number 6. Because coming up next, we are trading the fake jungle for a real snowy mountain lodge. And the gang is about to run smack into a snow ghost. Some very confused talk about Asian cultures, and a supporting character whose whole design has aged like milk left out in the sun. Number 6. That's Snow Ghost. Snow is falling in thick, heavy flakes. The mountain wind is howling like a wolf caught in a bear trap. A little wooden lodge sits at the bottom of a long white slope, and the yellow lights in its windows are the only bright thing for miles around. Inside the lodge, a warm fire is crackling. Hot cocoa is steaming in a mug on a small side table. A pair of wooden skis is leaning up against the wall by the front door. And out there in the swirling white blizzard, something big and hairy and white is moving between the trees. Its eyes are glowing pale blue. Its breath is puffing out in great big clouds, and it is coming down the mountain, one big slow step at a time, straight for the front door of the lodge. This one is called That's Snow Ghost. It is from the first season of the original Scooby-Doo series, and it aired on December 13th, 1969. Just 1 week after A Night of Fright Is No Delight had freaked out a whole generation of little kids with its green phantoms. Now, the show was back with a whole new fear. This time, the fear was a Yeti, a big white snow-covered monster that looked like a cross between a polar bear and a swamp thing. And this time, the setting was way up in the high snowy mountains of a foreign land. But the whole way the show handled that foreign land is what puts this episode on our list today. The story kicks off with the gang taking a winter vacation up in the mountains. They pull the mystery machine into a little ski lodge that has been carved right into the side of a snowy peak. The owner of the lodge is an elderly Asian man named Fu Lan Chi, and right away, when Fu Lan Chi is introduced to the audience, the show leans hard into a bunch of tired old Asian stereotypes that would make a modern viewer squirm in their seat. His accent is exaggerated. His clothes are drawn to look like a set of matching pajamas that no real person would actually wear on a working day. His name is a rhyming joke, and when he speaks, he sometimes mixes up his L's and his R's in a way that has been used to mock Asian speakers for over 100 years. The whole visual design of Fu Lan Chi is a big problem when you look at it with modern eyes. He has a long, thin, drooping mustache that hangs down past his chin. He has a wispy little beard that sticks straight out from his face. His eyes are drawn as two thin, curved lines, so thin that you can barely see any eye in there at all. His face is a pale yellow color. His fingers are long and bony. His whole look is straight out of the same old racist cartoon playbook that Hollywood used to draw Chinese and other Asian characters for decades. Even though the story of the episode says that Fu Lan Chi is Tibetan, not Chinese, the show still uses all of the same cartoon shortcuts to draw him. That mix-up between Chinese and Tibetan is actually one of the big things that this episode gets wrong. In one scene, Shaggy walks into a room full of old wooden statues and painted scrolls and colorful masks, and he says, "Look at all of this cool old Chinese stuff." But then Velma, being the smart one, pipes up and corrects him. "Actually, Shaggy," she says, "this is Tibetan art, not Chinese." That correction is meant to be a moment where the show tries to teach the young audience something educational, but the way it is written just kind of lumps all of Asian culture into one big pile and treats it like it is basically all the same. That kind of casual mixing up of one Asian country with another is another one of the things that modern viewers have called out about this episode. The Snow Ghost himself is a great big Yeti that has supposedly been terrorizing the mountain for hundreds of years. According to the local legend that gets explained explained in the episode, the snow ghost is the spirit of a monk who died on the mountain a long time ago and has come back as a hungry monster to guard the ancient treasures buried in the caves below the ski lodge. That legend is a mashup of a bunch of different Asian folklore traditions, all thrown into a blender and served up as one confused Saturday morning cartoon story. And the way the show treats that folklore is not exactly respectful. The legend is used mostly for cheap scares. The mountain spirits are used mostly for jump scenes. And the whole cultural background of the story is treated like a fun exotic backdrop, not a real tradition that real people have real feelings about. The chase scenes in this one are some of the wildest in the whole first season. The gang gets chased down a snowy mountain slope by the giant snow ghost. They tumble head over heels through the deep white powder. They slide down icy rocks. They almost fall off a cliff. They ski right over the edge of a frozen waterfall. All the while, the snow ghost is right behind them, roaring and reaching out with his big hairy paws. In one really wild sequence, Shaggy and Scooby end up on a runaway sled that is sliding straight toward the edge of a cliff, and the snow ghost is running after them, gaining on them, until at the very last second they steer the sled into a snowbank and stop just inches from falling off the edge. That is the kind of scene that had little kids gripping the edges of the couch and forgetting to breathe. But the part of the episode that has drawn the most fire in modern reviews is the way that the show treats the local mountain people. The background characters in this episode are drawn as stereotypes. Their clothes are all the same. Their faces are all the same. Their voices are all the same, with the same exaggerated accent that Fu Lanchi has. Nobody in the mountain village is treated as a real, full human being with their own personality. They are all just background props to make the exotic setting feel exotic. That kind of flat cardboard cutout treatment of a whole culture of people is one of the things that has kept this episode off of some streaming lineups in recent years. The way that the villain in the snow ghost suit gets unmasked at the end of the episode is also a little weird when you look back at it. The bad guy turns out to be a treasure hunter who was trying to scare people off the mountain so he could dig up the ancient artifacts that were buried in the caves. That reveal is fine on its own, but the way the gang talks about the artifacts, calling them treasure and prizes, and the way they talk about the local people as background characters who need saving has been criticized as a colonial way of telling a story. In other words, it is a story where a bunch of American teenagers roll into a foreign country, save the local people from a monster, dig up their old treasures, and then drive off in a van like nothing happened. That kind of story does not sit well with a modern audience that has grown up learning about the history of foreign countries being disrespected by outsiders. Cultural writers who have looked back at this episode in recent years have called it one of the clearest examples of casual racism in the original Scooby-Doo series. Not the loud, shocking kind of racism. Not the kind of racism that jumps off the screen and slaps you in the face. But the quiet, everyday kind of racism that shows up in small moments all through the story. The stereotyped accent, the exaggerated drawings, the mixed-up cultural references, the treatment of Asian folklore as spooky background. All of these little moments add up to an episode that just does not work anymore the way it did in 1969. There is also a scene in the middle of the episode where Shaggy tries to eat some traditional Tibetan food that Fu Lanchi has prepared for him. And instead of enjoying the food or asking about it, Shaggy makes a big scene of gagging and spitting it out and complaining that it does not taste like his usual hamburger. The scene is played for laughs, and it fits with Shaggy's whole character of being a picky eater. But the way it is written, it also sends the message that foreign food is gross, which is another one of those small, everyday racist moments that keep showing up in this episode. Streaming platforms today have kept that snow ghost in their libraries, but some parental guide websites have started to flag it with a note about outdated cultural depictions. That is a soft way of saying that the episode contains stereotypes that a modern viewer might find offensive. Some cartoon historians have suggested that the episode should be pulled from public rotation and only shown with a warning card, but so far, no streaming service has taken that step. It is still there, it is still available, and it is still one of the episodes that fans of the original show have to grapple with when they sit down to rewatch the classic first season with their own kids. The snow ghost design itself has been used again in later Scooby-Doo shows and movies over the years, but the character of Fulan Chi has never come back. The animators and writers who have worked on the more recent Scooby-Doo projects have quietly left him behind. That is one of the ways you can tell that the modern team knows the original character just does not fit anymore. They still love the monster. They still love the mountain setting, but they left the stereotype at the door when they walked into the 21st century. And that quiet dropping of a character is another form of soft banning that shows up all through the Scooby-Doo world. But if a snow ghost and a Tibetan stereotype were not enough for you, hold on tight. Because coming up next at number 5, we are heading way out west into a dusty old ghost town. And the villain this time is not from any foreign land. He is homegrown. He is American. And he is one of the oldest and creepiest tropes in the whole history of American storytelling. Say hello to Miner 49er, number 5. Mind your own business. Now we head out to the American Old West. Picture a wide open desert stretching out for miles in every direction. Red rocks, dry, cracked ground, cactus plants standing tall against the setting sun. A hot, dusty wind blows through the empty streets of an old ghost town. Wooden signs creak on rusty chains above the doors of broken down buildings. Tumbleweeds roll past the front porch of an old saloon. And in the middle of the town, a shovel is stuck in the dirt next to a hole in the ground. Somebody has been digging out here, somebody who nobody has ever seen. And that somebody, according to the local legend, is the ghost of a miner who died in these hills over 100 years ago. This episode is called Mind Your Own Business. It is from the first season of the original Scooby-Doo show, and it aired on October 18th, 1969. That was just 5 weeks after the pilot first hit the airwaves, and it was one of the first episodes to really lean into a very American kind of scary story. Not a haunted mansion, not a foreign monster, not a big robot. This time, the scare was a homegrown American ghost, and the whole feel of the episode is built to remind viewers of every old cowboy movie they had ever seen at the drive-in on a Friday night. The villain in this one is called Miner 49er. His name is a reference to the California gold rush of 1849, when tens of thousands of Americans rushed out to the west to try to strike it rich by digging for gold. Most of those miners never found any gold at all. Most of them died out in the desert, broke and hungry and alone. And Miner 49er is meant to be the ghost of one of those failed gold rush prospectors, come back from the dead to protect the last little bit of gold that was buried out in these hills. The design of Miner 49er is one of the most memorable in the whole first season. He wears an old dusty prospector outfit. He has a wide-brimmed hat pulled down low over his face. He carries a rusty old pickaxe over one shoulder. And where his eyes should be, there is nothing but 2 black empty holes. His face is a hollow skull with a bushy white beard. His hands are bones sticking out of his coat sleeves. And when he moves, he lets out a low, creepy laugh that echoes off the rocks of the canyon walls. That laugh alone was enough to give little kids the shivers for weeks after the episode aired. The whole story kicks off when the gang stops for the night in a small mining town somewhere out in the American Southwest. The town is mostly empty. Most of the buildings are boarded up. The people who still live there are all older folks who have been in the town for their whole lives. And every single one of those older folks tells the gang the same story about how Miner 49er walks these hills at night and how anyone who goes near the old abandoned mine will meet a terrible end. That kind of small town setup is a classic scary story setup, and the show plays it up for all it is worth. The issue that critics have raised with this episode in modern reviews is not so much about race or culture. It is about age. It is about how the episode leans on the fear of old rural people to build up its creepy atmosphere. Every single background character in the town is drawn as an older person with hunched shoulders, wrinkled faces, missing teeth, and shaky voices, and every single one of them is treated as either a source of spooky information or as a potential suspect who might be behind the whole Miner 49er scheme. The show sends a subtle message that older people who live out in rural America are strange, scary, and possibly dangerous. That kind of message has not aged well. There's a scene in the middle of the episode that has been talked about a lot on classic cartoon message boards. Shaggy and Scooby wander into an old abandoned saloon looking for something to eat, and when they push open the swinging doors, they find themselves face to face with a room full of dusty old skeletons still sitting at the poker tables. The skeletons are all frozen in the middle of playing a card game, with their cards still clutched in their bony hands, and their glasses of whiskey still sitting in front of them. That scene is played for laughs, but the image itself is genuinely disturbing. A room full of dead men still playing cards. That is a heavy image for a Saturday morning cartoon aimed at little kids. There is also a big scene toward the end of the episode, where the whole gang gets trapped inside the old mine tunnels. The mine is dark. The mine is full of low-hanging beams and shaky wooden supports. The mine has old rusty carts on old rusty rails. And as the gang runs deeper and deeper into the mine, they realize that Miner 49er has been chasing them the whole way, and that he has been slowly closing off all of their exits. There is a moment where Daphne almost falls down a bottomless shaft. There is a moment where Fred almost gets crushed by a cave-in. There is a moment where Velma nearly gets trapped under a rock slide. And through all of that, the ghostly laughter of Miner 49er echoes off the tunnel walls, following them everywhere they go. The tropes that this episode leans on are some of the oldest tropes in American storytelling. The lonely ghost town, the abandoned mine, the vengeful spirit of a dead prospector, the player piano that plays all on its own, with no one at the keys, the saloon doors that swing back and forth in the wind, the mirror on the wall that shows a ghostly face instead of your own. All of these tropes come straight out of old Western movies and old campfire stories that Americans have been telling each other for over 100 years. Scooby-Doo did not invent any of these ideas, but the show did put them all together in one tight little half-hour package that scared a whole generation of kids about the American West. The moment where Miner 49er is finally unmasked at the end of the episode is a moment that a lot of fans still remember. When the mask comes off, it turns out that Miner 49er has been a normal person in a costume the whole time. Of course, because that is how every Scooby-Doo episode ends. But the way the reveal is written, and the way the villain explains their scheme, has some elements that have not aged well. The bad guy is presented as a lonely, bitter old person who wanted to scare people away from the mine because they thought there was still gold hidden in there. And the show treats that lonely, bitter old person as a punchline. Kids at home laughed at the reveal, but grown-up viewers watching today have said that laughing at a lonely, elderly person is not exactly a great message to send to little kids. There's also the whole issue of how the episode treats the history of the American Old West. The 1960s were a time when a lot of Americans still thought of the Old West as this romantic time of cowboys and prospectors and pioneers. But the real Old West also included a lot of pain and hardship for the Native American peoples who were pushed off their land. The real gold rushes brought a lot of violence and destruction to the environment and to the people who already lived in those places. None of that hard history shows up in this Scooby-Doo episode. The Old West is treated as a fun, spooky playground, and that erasure of the real history is another quiet form of harm that runs through the whole story. Some parental guide services have noted that this episode has a slightly higher fear level than the average Scooby-Doo show. The design of Miner 49er is genuinely scary. The mine tunnel chase is genuinely tense. The skeleton saloon scene is genuinely disturbing. And the whole atmosphere of the episode is heavier and more full of dread than a lot of the other early stories. Because of all of that, some parental guide services have suggested that parents preview the episode before letting their very little ones watch. That is another one of those soft ban markers that shows up when a show has aged in a way that makes modern audiences uncomfortable. Streaming platforms have kept Mind Your Own Business in their libraries. It has never been officially pulled, but it also does not get the same kind of love from the streaming algorithms that other classic Scooby-Doo episodes get. It does not show up as often on the recommended lists. It does not get used as the sample episode when a new fan is trying out the show for the first time, and it does not get referenced in the marketing for newer Scooby-Doo projects. All of those quiet little signs point to a show that the streaming platforms are willing to keep, but that they are not exactly eager to promote. Fans who love the original series still hold this episode in high regard. Miner 49er shows up on almost every fan list of the top Scooby-Doo villains of all time. His design is iconic. His laugh is iconic. His whole vibe is iconic. And for the fans who grew up watching the show in reruns through the 1970s and 80s, the memory of Miner 49er still hits hard. But for the modern parent trying to introduce their own kids to the classic show, this is one of those episodes that gets a second look before it gets played on the family TV. But if a spooky old miner in a ghost town were not enough to shake you, buckle up, because coming up next at number 4, we are trading the dusty American desert for the burning sands of ancient Egypt, and the gang is about to run headfirst into a mummy, a curse, and a whole boatload of cultural appropriation that would never fly in a modern kids show. Number 4. Scooby-Doo and a Mummy 2. There is a certain smell that comes from the pages of an old dusty book. Papery, dry, a little bit sweet, a little bit sour, like the smell of a room that has been closed up for 100 years. Now imagine walking into a museum wing that smells just like that. The lights are dim, the floors are cold marble, glass cases line the walls, and inside those glass cases are objects that were placed there by hands that turned to dust thousands and thousands of years ago. In the middle of the room, standing tall on a wooden platform, is an ancient stone coffin. The coffin is carved with strange writing that nobody in the room can read. And inside that coffin, wrapped up tight in yellow bandages that have gone brown with age, is a mummy. And that mummy, according to the sign on the wall, has been asleep in that coffin for over 3,000 years. This one is called Scooby-Doo and a Mummy 2. It is from the first season of the original Scooby-Doo series, and it aired on November 29th, 1969. It is one of the earliest episodes to lean into the whole idea of ancient curses and lost civilizations, and it kicked off a Scooby-Doo tradition of mummy episodes that would keep going all the way into the 2000s and beyond. Every time a new Scooby-Doo show or movie has come out over the past several decades, sooner or later, someone on the writing team decides that it is time for a mummy story. And every single one of those mummy stories, in one way or another, goes back to this original 1969 episode. The setup for the story is pretty simple. The gang has stopped by a big university museum to help out a professor who is an old friend of the family. The professor has just brought back a huge collection of ancient Egyptian artifacts from an archaeological dig somewhere along the Nile River. The centerpiece of the collection is a solid gold coin, and inscribed on that coin is what looks like a warning message, written in an old hieroglyphic script. The professor thinks the coin might be worth a fortune, but he also worries that the coin might be cursed. And sure enough, on the very first night that the gang stays at the museum, the mummy in the ancient coffin sits up, opens its eyes, and starts to walk. And anyone that mummy touches, according to the local legend, will turn to stone. Now, the trouble with this episode, when you look at it with modern eyes, is not just one thing. It is many things all at once. It is the whole way that the show handles ancient Egypt. Egyptian culture is treated in this story less like a real historical civilization and more like a fun, exotic backdrop for a spooky scare. The hieroglyphics on the walls are treated as mysterious scribbles instead of a real written language that people used for thousands of years. The artifacts in the museum are treated as prizes and treasures instead of religious objects that had real meaning to the people who made them. And the mummy itself is treated as a shambling monster instead of a person who once lived, breathed, laughed, and loved. The whole idea of using an ancient Egyptian mummy as a Saturday morning cartoon villain is something that a lot of writers, historians, and educators have been talking about more and more in recent years. Ancient Egypt was a real place. Real people lived there. Real people were buried there, and the practice of digging up those real people and putting them on display in museums has itself been a subject of a lot of hard conversations over the past few decades. Some countries have started to demand that mummies and artifacts be returned to Egypt so that they can be treated with the respect that real human remains deserve. Some museums have started to rethink how they display ancient Egyptian objects, and some educators have started to teach their students that turning a real dead person into a cartoon monster is not really an okay thing to do. The design of the mummy in this episode is another one of those things that has raised eyebrows in modern reviews. The mummy is drawn with all the classic mummy movie shortcuts. The bandages are half falling off. One arm is stuck straight out in front of him. He drags one leg behind him as he walks. His eyes are glowing red beads. His mouth hangs open in a permanent groan. Every single one of those design choices comes straight out of old Hollywood mummy movies. From the 1930s and 40s, movies that themselves have been criticized for how they portrayed ancient Egyptian culture. Scooby-Doo took all of those old movie tropes and packaged them up for a whole new generation of kids. And in doing so, the show helped to keep those tropes alive for another 50 years. There is a scene in the middle of the episode that has been picked apart by cultural critics in recent years. In the scene, Shaggy and Scooby stumble into a room full of Egyptian statues, and they start making jokes about how funny the statues look. They put on fake pharaoh hats. They mimic the poses of the statues. They do a little dance while chanting made-up nonsense words that are meant to sound like ancient Egyptian. The whole scene is played for laughs, and it fits with the goofy character work that Shaggy and Scooby are known for. But when you watch it back today, it does not really land as funny anymore. It lands as two American teenagers making fun of a foreign culture for cheap laughs. And that kind of scene of white kids mocking ancient traditions of brown people is exactly the kind of scene that would never be written into a modern kids cartoon. The chase scenes in this episode are some of the most intense in the whole first season. The mummy stalks the gang through the museum for what feels like forever. His slow shuffling walk is intercut with tighter and tighter close-ups of his glowing red eyes. His outstretched hand reaches out for one gang member after another. In one particularly heart-pounding sequence, Velma trips over an artifact and finds herself lying on the floor with the mummy standing right over her, his bandaged hand just inches from her face. In another sequence, Shaggy and Scooby end up trapped inside the mummy's coffin itself, and the lid slowly slides shut on top of them while they scream. Those are heavy moments for a kid's cartoon, and they are moments that some parents at the time wrote letters to the network about. The whole idea of a curse that turns people to stone is also something that this episode plays with in a way that has been criticized. Throughout the episode, various background characters get touched by the mummy and get frozen solid, turned into gray stone statues. These statues are shown lined up around the museum, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. That is a genuinely creepy image. And when you multiply it out and think about how many people the mummy has cursed over the course of the story, you start to realize that the show is actually implying that a lot of people have died or been transformed into inanimate objects. That kind of body horror is heavy stuff for a Saturday morning cartoon, and it is another one of the reasons why some critics have flagged this episode as too dark for its target audience. The professor character in this episode is another figure who has drawn some criticism in modern reviews. He is presented as a very European-looking archaeologist who has spent his career digging up artifacts from other countries and bringing them back to his university in America. That kind of character was very common in adventure movies of the mid-20th century. But over the past few decades, a lot of people have started to point out that this kind of character represents a kind of scholarly colonialism that has caused real harm to real cultures. The professor never once in this episode stops to think about whether it is right for him to be digging up ancient Egyptian tombs and taking the objects back to his American museum. That question is just not asked. And in 2026, that question would definitely be asked in any modern kids show. The gold coin at the center of the mystery is another interesting little detail. When the villain is finally unmasked at the end of the episode, it turns out that the whole thing has been a scheme by a rival archaeologist who wanted to steal the coin for himself. That plot twist is fine as far as Scooby-Doo mysteries go, but the whole story assumes that ancient Egyptian gold is fair game for whoever can grab it, whether that be the university museum or the rival archaeologist. Nobody in the story ever suggests that maybe the coin should be returned to Egypt where it belongs. Nobody asks whether the descendants of the people who originally made the coin might have a claim on it. The gold is just treated as loot to be fought over, and that is another one of those quiet colonial attitudes that runs all through the episode. There are also a few background details in the museum sets that have not aged well. Some of the wall murals depict scenes from ancient Egyptian life in ways that use racist shortcuts to draw the human figures. Some of the statues are drawn with features that borrow from ugly old caricatures instead of from real ancient Egyptian art. And some of the hieroglyphics on the walls are just random scribbles that do not mean anything, treated by the animators as decorative doodles instead of as a real writing system. Every one of those little visual choices adds up to an episode that treats ancient Egypt as a set of scary, spooky props instead of as a real and living culture. Some Egyptian and Egyptian American viewers who have written about this episode over the years have pointed out that growing up with cartoons like this one shaped how a lot of American kids thought about Egypt and about Egyptian people. The idea that Egypt is a land of mummies and curses and gold, instead of a land of real people with real history and real modern lives, comes partly from cartoons like this one, and undoing that image, teaching new generations of kids that Egypt is a real modern country and not just a spooky cartoon backdrop, has been a slow and hard job for teachers and writers ever since. Scooby-Doo and a Mummy too is one of the many cultural products that helped to build up that old cartoonish image of Egypt in the first place. Streaming platforms today still carry this episode as part of the standard first season lineup. It has not been officially pulled or banned anywhere in the world, but some cultural writers have started to suggest that the episode should be aired with a warning card, or should be accompanied by an educational note about the history of ancient Egypt. So far, no streaming service has taken that step. The episode continues to run without any warning, and every new generation of Scooby-Doo fans encounters it fresh, without any context for the ways in which it has aged poorly. That silent lack of context is itself a kind of harm, according to some critics. The Scooby-Doo franchise has continued to make new Mummy episodes over the past few decades, and in the more recent shows, the writers have tried to be more careful about how they handle Egyptian culture. Some newer Mummy episodes actually feature Egyptian characters as heroes instead of as background props. Some newer Mummy episodes actually explain the history of ancient Egypt in a respectful way. Some newer Mummy episodes even go so far as to gently make fun of the old racist tropes that the original 1969 episode leaned on so hard. That kind of quiet correction is another way that the modern team has slowly been walking back the mistakes of the original show. The Mummy is still a villain, but the culture is treated with more respect now than it was back then. But if an ancient Egyptian mummy and a whole boatload of colonial attitudes were not enough for you, hold on tight, because coming up next at number 3, we are heading to the Big Top Circus, and the villain in this one is not just problematic because of what he does. He is problematic because of the way that one of his co-stars is treated all the way through the episode. This one uses language that would get a modern show pulled off the air by lunchtime. Number 3. Bedlam in the Big Top. The smell of buttered popcorn floats through the air. The sound of a brass band plays over a scratchy speaker system. Colored lights blink on and off around the outside of a huge red and white striped tent. Inside that tent, hundreds of families are packed onto wooden bleacher seats, all facing a center ring made of soft brown sawdust. A ringmaster in a bright red coat and a tall black hat strides into the center of the ring. He tips his hat to the crowd. He raises his voice into a big brass megaphone, and he announces that the show is about to begin. This is the world of the traveling American circus. This is where families spent their Saturday nights before TV took over. And this is the setting for one of the most uncomfortable episodes in the whole original Scooby-Doo series. Bedlam in the Big Top comes from the first season of Scooby-Doo. Where Are You? It aired on November 8th, 1969. The whole story takes place at a circus that has been shut down after a strange masked figure called the Ghost Clown started sneaking around the tent at night, hypnotizing the animals, scaring the performers, and sabotaging the acts. The circus owner has been forced to close the show and send the animals back to their cages. And now the gang has been called in to solve the mystery of the Ghost Clown before the circus is forced to shut down for good. The Ghost Clown himself is one of the most iconic Scooby-Doo villains of all time. His face is painted white as a sheet. His mouth is a jagged black grin from ear to ear. His eyes are two thin dark slits with no color in them. His outfit is a black and purple jester costume with jingling bells on the sleeves and shoes. And his big trick is that he can hypnotize anyone he looks at, sending them into a deep sleep from which they wake up doing things they never would have done on purpose. That hypnosis power is what makes him so scary. He does not just chase you, he gets inside your head and takes over your mind. That is a much heavier kind of villain power than the average Scooby-Doo bad guy has. But the real trouble with this episode has almost nothing to do with the Ghost Clown himself. The trouble comes from a supporting character who is one of the circus performers. His name is Max. He is a little person, and throughout the whole episode, from start to finish, the show uses a word to describe him that has not been an acceptable word to use in polite company for many, many decades. That word is used over and over again. It is used in dialogue. It is used in signs on the circus tent. It is used by the ringmaster when he introduces Max to the crowd. And it is used by other characters when they are talking about Max, even when he is not in the room. Every single time Max is on screen, the show finds a way to work that word into the scene. We are not going to repeat that word here, but if you have ever watched the episode yourself, you know exactly which word we are talking about. It is a word that starts with the letter M. It is a word that used to be used in the past to describe little people and other performers who worked in the circus and in vaudeville shows. It is a word that today is considered a slur by many people in the little person community. It is a word that most modern TV networks have banned from their family programming. And it is a word that shows up not once, not twice, but many times, all through this Scooby-Doo episode. The specific scene that gets talked about the most in modern reviews is a scene where Max is standing next to Scooby-Doo backstage at the circus. The two of them are trying to solve the mystery together. And in that scene, Max climbs up onto Scooby's back and rides him around backstage, like Scooby is a little pony. The whole bit is played for laughs. Max holds a pretend cowboy hat in one hand and swings a pretend lasso in the other. He shouts things like giddy up and yee-haw while Scooby runs him around in circles. And the whole time, other characters watch and laugh and make jokes about how funny it is to see a little person riding a great big dog. That whole scene from top to bottom would never make it into a modern Scooby-Doo show. Not the writing, not the language, not the jokes. The thing that makes this scene particularly hard to watch today is that Max is never really given his own personality outside of his physical appearance. He does not get to be a full character with his own backstory, his own dreams, his own inner life. He is just there as a visual joke. He is there to look small. He is there to say his one or two lines, and he is there to serve as a prop for other characters to make fun of. That kind of flat treatment of a person with dwarfism is exactly what disability rights groups have been fighting against for the past several decades. And Bedlam in the Big Top is one of the classic examples that gets pointed to when those groups explain what they mean when they talk about harmful representation. The physical comedy in this episode is also a real problem when you look at it with modern eyes. Max gets tossed around a lot. He falls down a lot. He gets caught in a lot of pratfalls that use his small size for cheap laughs. In one scene, he gets stuck inside a big rubber ball that gets rolled across the circus floor by another performer. In another scene, he gets accidentally launched out of a cannon that was supposed to be aimed somewhere else. In another scene, he gets trapped inside a big cake that gets carried across the room by a waiter. Every single one of those bits treats his body as a punchline instead of treating him as a person, and every single one of those bits would today be seen as offensive by the little person community and by most reasonable viewers. The ghost clown hypnosis scenes are also something that some parents have flagged as too intense for very little kids. When the ghost clown fixes his eyes on someone and starts to whisper his hypnotic chant, the whole scene goes dark. The colors drain out of the picture. Wavy hypnotic circles start to spin on the screen, and the person being hypnotized starts to move like a puppet on strings, doing whatever the ghost clown tells them to do. In one particularly disturbing sequence, Daphne gets hypnotized and starts to unicycle across a tightrope, stretched high above the circus floor. She is not doing it on purpose. She is being controlled, and if she falls, she will die. That kind of mind control body horror is a lot for a kid's cartoon to put on the screen. There is also a scene where Scooby-Doo himself gets hypnotized by the ghost clown, and when he is under the spell, Scooby is made to do things that go against his usual sweet, gentle personality. He growls at Shaggy. He snaps his teeth at Velma. He tries to attack the other members of the gang. That kind of scene is played to make the audience feel worried and scared, and it does its job well. But some parents have argued that showing a beloved family pet character getting taken over and turned against his friends is a heavy image for a little kid to process. Kids form real emotional bonds with cartoon characters, and watching Scooby-Doo of all characters get twisted into someone dangerous can be really upsetting for a young viewer. The circus setting itself is another thing that has drawn some modern criticism. Circuses in the 1960s often used animals in ways that we now know were cruel and harmful. Elephants, lions, tigers, and other wild animals were kept in small cages, forced to perform tricks under threat of punishment, and shipped from town to town in conditions that no animal should ever have to live in. This Scooby-Doo episode presents the circus as a fun, happy place, a place where the animals seem to enjoy performing, and where everything is bright and cheerful. That kind of presentation of the circus as a happy place has been criticized by animal welfare groups as a whitewashing of a really cruel industry. Modern kids' shows are much more careful about how they show circuses today, if they show them at all. Many circuses across America and the world have since given up their animal acts entirely because of pressure from the public. The way that the villain in the ghost clown costume gets unmasked at the end of the episode is another thing worth thinking about. The bad guy turns out to be, of course, a normal person in a fake clown mask, but the specific person who is under the mask is presented in a way that has made some modern viewers uncomfortable. Without giving away the whole reveal, let us just say that the bad guy is another person with a physical characteristic, that the show plays for laughs. That decision to have not just Max, but also another character in the episode be treated as a visual punchline means that the whole story has an ugly current of making fun of people for their bodies. That current runs from the first scene to the last scene, and it is what makes Bedlam in the Big Top such a hard episode to watch today. Cultural writers and disability advocates have both called out Bedlam in the Big Top as one of the worst offenders in the entire original Scooby-Doo series. It is often ranked at the top of lists of episodes that would never fly today. Some blogs have called for the episode to be removed from streaming services entirely. Some have called for a warning card to be placed at the start. Some have called for the language to be edited out, and for the physical comedy scenes to be trimmed. Different fans and critics have different ideas about what the right response should be, but almost everyone agrees that the episode as it originally aired in 1969 is a mess that would never get made today. Streaming platforms so far have not officially banned the episode, but some editions of the classic Scooby-Doo release have quietly edited out some of the worst offending scenes. Some home video sets have replaced certain lines of dialogue with new voice work that softens the language. Some streaming services have added a small advisory note before the episode plays, warning viewers that the show reflects the attitudes of its time. None of these are a full ban, but taken together, they are all signs of an episode that the whole industry knows is a problem. Even if nobody wants to be the first one to actually pull it from the shelves, but if a little person being called a slur and turned into a physical punchline was hard to watch, brace yourself, because coming up next at number 2, we are heading to the American Southwest, and the gang is about to run smack into a Native American ghost story that is packed so full of bad stereotypes that it makes everything you have seen so far look mild. This one might be the most cringe-worthy episode of the whole first season. Number 2. Decoy for a dog napper. The wind blows red dust across a wide open desert. The sun is setting behind a row of tall stone cliffs. In the distance, ancient stone dwellings are carved right into the side of the mountain. Old ladders stick out of the openings. Old pottery sits on the ledges. Old paintings cover the walls with scenes of hunting and dancing, and stories that stretch back thousands of years. And out there in that fading orange light, a spirit is said to walk, a great warrior, a famous chief, a man whose name has been remembered for over 100 years. And now, according to the local folklore, his ghost has come back to protect the sacred ground from anyone who dares to disturb it. This episode is called Decoy for a Dog Napper. It is from the first season of the original Scooby-Doo series, and it first aired on October 4th, 1969. It was only the 5th episode ever made, but it was already deep into the territory of what many modern viewers now consider some of the most uncomfortable moments in the whole classic run. And once you understand what happens in this episode, you will understand why so many cultural critics have put it near the top of their lists of Scooby-Doo shows that would never air today the way they aired back then. The setup of the story starts with a series of dog kidnappings. Somebody has been sneaking around town and grabbing prize-winning show dogs one by one and dragging them off to some unknown place. The gang decides that the best way to catch the dog napper is to use Scooby-Doo himself as bait. They enter Scooby into a big dog show and they wait for the kidnapper to come after him. Sure enough, that night at a fancy dog show, Scooby gets grabbed, and when the gang follows his trail, They end up out in the desert in a big Pueblo cliff dwelling, and that is where the trouble really begins. The villain in this episode is called the Ghost of Geronimo. Geronimo was a real historical figure. He was an Apache leader who fought against the American and Mexican governments in the late 1800s. He is a real hero to many Native American people today. He was a real complicated person with a real complicated life story, and his memory means something important to real communities. And this Scooby-Doo episode takes his name, takes his legacy, and turns him into a spooky cartoon ghost. That is a big problem. That was a big problem in 1969. That is an even bigger problem in 2026. And it is the single biggest reason why this episode has stayed near the top of the ban list for so long. Turning a real historical Native American leader into a Saturday morning cartoon ghost villain is disrespectful in a way that is hard to explain if you have not thought about it before. Imagine if a cartoon show made a spooky episode called The Ghost of Abraham Lincoln, and the ghost was a scary villain who chased kids around a haunted mansion. That would be strange. That would feel wrong. That would probably make a lot of Americans really uncomfortable. Now multiply that discomfort by the fact that Native American peoples have been through hundreds of years of hardship at the hands of the American government, and the fact that Native American leaders like Geronimo are figures of real dignity and real importance in their communities. That is why the Ghost of Geronimo storyline lands so hard when a modern viewer watches it back. The design of the Ghost of Geronimo character is another major issue. He is drawn with all of the tired old cartoon shortcuts that Hollywood used to draw Native American characters for decades. He has a big feather headdress that trails down his back. He has bright red skin. He has war paint smeared across his face in patterns that were made up by cartoon artists who had no idea what any real Native American war paint looked like. He carries a tomahawk in one hand and a scalping knife in the other, and he speaks in a broken kind of English that mixes up small words and adds extra HS to the ends of sentences. Every one of those design choices, top to bottom, is based on old racist ideas about what Native American people were supposed to look and sound like, and every one of those design choices has been called out by Native American writers and educators as harmful. There is a specific line in this episode that has been called out more than any other line. It comes when Shaggy is being chased by the Ghost of Geronimo through the cliff dwellings. He is running as fast as his long, skinny legs will carry him, and he shouts back over his shoulder that nobody is getting his beautiful long hair. He is talking about the practice of scalping, which was a real practice that happened on both sides during the Indian Wars of the American West. But by turning it into a punchline for a Saturday morning cartoon, the show reduces a real and horrible part of American history to a quick throwaway joke. Shaggy uses the word beautiful to describe his own hair. He uses a light joking tone, and the whole scene is played for laughs. But for many Native American viewers watching that scene today, that quick line hits hard. It is not funny. It is dismissive of a real trauma. The dialogue in this episode is packed with other lines that have not aged well either. Various characters throughout the story use the phrase pale face when they are talking about the gang. Pale face is a term that old Hollywood movies used to have Native American characters say when talking about white people. It was a term that was made up by writers who wanted to make Native American characters sound different and exotic and vaguely threatening. It was not really something that Native American people ever actually said in real life, but it became a Hollywood shorthand, and it made its way from old cowboy movies straight into this Scooby-Doo episode. Every time a character in the episode uses the phrase, a modern viewer cringes. That kind of made-up Hollywood dialogue is one of the many quiet ways that old cartoons kept teaching kids the wrong things about Native American culture. The Pueblo cliff dwelling setting is another aspect of the episode that has drawn criticism. Real Pueblo cliff dwellings are ancient homes that were built by real ancestral Puebloan peoples hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Some of them still stand today in the American Southwest, in places like Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon in Bandelier. Those places are sacred to many Pueblo peoples today. They are historic sites that need to be protected, and this Scooby-Doo episode uses them as a spooky backdrop for a chase scene without any acknowledgement of their real cultural or historical importance. The gang runs through them. Traps get sprung inside them. Fake ghost tricks get set up in them. The whole real history of the place gets treated as scenery for a kid's cartoon adventure. There's also a scene in the middle of the episode where Fred and Daphne stumble into a room full of Native American art and artifacts, and instead of respecting the objects, they start touching them. They pick up masks and put them on. They pull weapons off the walls and swing them around. They knock over pottery and laugh about it. They treat the whole room like it is a fun costume store, instead of a sacred storehouse of real cultural objects. That kind of scene of white teenagers treating Native American cultural objects as toys has been pointed out by many critics as a really upsetting example of cultural disrespect. And it is a scene that would definitely never make it into a modern Scooby-Doo show. The way that the villain in the Ghost of Geronimo costume gets unmasked at the end of the episode is also a source of criticism. The bad guy turns out to be a white man who was using the ghost story to scare people away from a hidden operation he had going in the cliff dwellings. He was dressing up as a Native American ghost to hide his crimes. That plot twist is fine on its own, but the way it is written, the show ends up sending a message that dressing up as a Native American ghost is a totally normal thing that a bad guy might do. The gang unmasks him and calls him out for being a criminal, but nobody in the story ever says that. Dressing up as a Native American leader is itself an offensive thing to do. That silence is another form of harm. It teaches the young audience that this kind of costume is fair game, that this kind of cultural appropriation is acceptable, and that the only wrong thing is being caught for the underlying crime. The soundtrack of the episode is another thing that has drawn criticism from cultural writers. Whenever the Ghost of Geronimo shows up on screen, the background music plays a stereotyped set of drum beats that Hollywood used for decades to signal that a Native American character was about to appear. That kind of stereotyped musical shorthand has its own long history in American movies and cartoons, and it is not really connected to any real Native American musical tradition. Real Native American music is diverse and complex and beautiful. It varies from one tribe to another. It uses many different instruments and vocal styles, but you would never know any of that from watching this Scooby-Doo episode. The music treats Native American culture as one flat generic thing. Another cartoon shortcut that Hollywood invented and passed off as authentic for too many decades. Modern educators who have used old cartoons to teach kids about media literacy have often used this episode as a case study. It is a good example of how many different kinds of harmful stereotypes can be packed into one single half hour of programming. It has stereotyped visuals. It has stereotyped dialogue. It has stereotyped music. It has cultural appropriation. It has disrespectful treatment of a real historical figure. It has erasure of real Native American history, and it has cheap jokes about real trauma. Almost every element you would need for a lesson on how not to depict Native American people is right there in this episode. That is why so many teachers use it in classrooms today. Native American writers who have commented on the episode over the years have been mostly patient about it, but they have also been clear that it is an example of what should never be repeated. Some Native American film critics have pointed out that seeing this kind of cartoon on Saturday morning TV over and over again as a kid shapes the way that non-Native kids grow up thinking about Native American people. It builds up a picture in their minds of Native Americans as ghost warriors and scalping enemies and feather-wearing spirits, instead of as real modern people who work jobs and raise families and live full modern lives. That harmful picture has taken generations of hard work to break down, and cartoons like this one are part of why the work has been so hard. Streaming platforms have not officially banned Decoy for a Dognapper, but this is one of the episodes that gets talked about the most when people ask which classic Scooby-Doo episodes should be pulled from the library. Some parental guide services have added strong warning notes about the depictions of Native American culture. Some cartoon historians have suggested that the episode should be pulled from public rotation entirely, and some producers of newer Scooby-Doo projects have quietly said in interviews that they would never write an episode like this today. All of those signs taken together point to a show that the whole industry knows is a real problem. But so far, the episode is still there, still on the streaming lineup, still available for any kid to click on and watch, and that quiet availability is itself a form of ongoing harm. Later Scooby-Doo shows and movies have tried in recent years to make up for some of the damage of episodes like this one. Some newer projects have featured Native American characters as heroes and helpers. Some newer projects have consulted with Native American cultural advisors to make sure the depictions are respectful. Some newer projects have gone out of their way to include real Native American folklore and real Native American history in ways that treat those things with dignity. Those newer projects are steps in the right direction, but they cannot undo the fact that this original episode is still out there, still being watched, still teaching new generations of kids the same old bad ideas that it was teaching back in 1969. But if the ghost of Geronimo and all of the tired old Native American stereotypes were not enough to shock you, hold on tight, because coming up at the #1 spot, we are heading to a whole new kind of disaster. This is the episode that gets named more than any other in every list of the worst Scooby-Doo shows of all time. This is the one that cultural critics have called the most insensitive cartoon episode of the entire 1960s. This is the one that fans do not even like to talk about. And once you see it for yourself, you will understand exactly why. #1. Mystery Mask Mix-Up. Now imagine this scene playing out in front of you. Bright red paper lanterns hang from strings that stretch across a narrow city street. Firecrackers pop and crackle in the alleyways. The smell of hot noodles and sweet buns drifts from the open doorways of a dozen little restaurants. Golden dragons dance and weave down the middle of the street, held up by teams of performers hidden under yards of colorful silk. Drummers beat on giant drums. Cymbals crash. A festival is happening. This is Chinatown, the way that cartoon writers in the late 1960s imagined it. Or rather, this is Chinatown the way that some very ignorant cartoon writers in the late 1960s imagined it. Because what happens in this episode is not really about any real Chinatown, or any real Chinese culture, or any real people at all. What happens here is a train wreck of stereotypes so bad that it has earned the top spot on almost every list of the worst Scooby-Doo episodes ever made. Mystery Mask Mix-Up comes from the second season of the original Scooby-Doo series. It aired on September 19th, 1970. The show was already a huge hit by then, and the writers must have felt like they could try anything and get away with it. So they decided to send the gang to Chinatown. And the way they wrote that trip is now considered by many critics to be the single most racist episode in the whole classic Scooby-Doo run. It is not close. Every other episode we have talked about today has some problems. Some of them have big problems, but this one, this Chinatown episode, is on a whole different level. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The story kicks off with the gang traveling to Chinatown to deliver a rare Chinese mask to a mask shop owner. The mask is worth a lot of money and someone else wants it. That someone else is the villain of the story, and his name is the ghost of Zen Tuo. Right there in the villain's name, you can already see the trouble. Zen Tuo is a name that is meant to sound spooky and exotic and Chinese, but it is not a real Chinese name. It is made up by cartoon writers who wanted their villain to sound foreign and dangerous. And the design of the ghost of Zen Tuo is even worse than his name. He is drawn to look like the classic old Hollywood villain named Fu Manchu, a character from old pulp novels and movies that was based on the ugliest racist stereotypes about Chinese people that Western writers had ever come up with. The ghost of Zen Tuo has a long, thin, drooping mustache that hangs down past his chest. He has a wispy, pointy beard. He wears long, flowing dark robes with dragons stitched onto them. He has long fingernails that come to sharp points, and he cackles. Oh, does he cackle? Every time he shows up on screen, he lets out a high-pitched laugh that is meant to sound sinister and foreign at the same time. That whole design is called Yellow Peril, and it comes from a long, ugly history of Western artists drawing Asian villains as inhuman monsters. Yellow Peril was used in American propaganda posters. It was used in old movies. It was used in old newspaper cartoons. And it was used right here in a Saturday morning kids cartoon show less than 100 years after it first started being used to whip up hatred against Chinese immigrants in America. But the ghost of Zen Tuo is not even the worst part of this episode. The worst part comes when Shaggy and Scooby have to sneak into a Chinese restaurant to look for clues. They put on disguises, they dress up as Chinese waiters, and the way that those disguises are drawn and played is genuinely one of the most uncomfortable things you can watch in a mainstream cartoon show. They wear silk waiter jackets. They put on cone-shaped straw hats. They stick fake buck teeth into their mouths. They pull the corners of their eyes back with their fingers to make their eyes look slanted. And when they talk, they use an exaggerated accent that turns every L into a W. They order food by saying "wook like this" and "wook like that." Every single one of those choices is a racist cartoon shortcut that Americans used for over 100 years to make fun of Chinese immigrants. And in this Scooby-Doo episode, all of those shortcuts get piled on top of each other, all in one scene, played entirely for laughs. Modern viewers who stumble across this episode for the first time often cannot believe that they are really seeing what they are seeing. They rewind, they watch it again, they pause the screen, they squint at the animation, and they realize that yes, this really is what they are watching. Two beloved main characters from a beloved classic cartoon are dressed up as racist stereotypes of Chinese people. They are doing exaggerated fake accents. They are making themselves look like walking racist newspaper cartoons from the 1880s. And this is on a mainstream kids cartoon show that has been on the air for decades. That kind of scene would never get made today. It would never get pitched. It would never get past the first draft. It would never even get into the writer's room. But in 1970, it aired on the CBS television network as part of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And it has been quietly haunting the show ever since. The chase scenes in this episode also lean hard into more stereotypes. The gang runs through a laundry shop where every worker is drawn as a racist caricature. They run through a mask shop where every mask is drawn to look like an ugly Asian face. They run through a fireworks factory where the workers are treated like background props with no personalities. And in one particularly bad sequence, they run into a group of ghost figures that are drawn to look like jiangshi. Jiangshi are figures from real Chinese folklore. They are hopping vampire spirits that appear in real Chinese ghost stories. And in this Scooby-Doo episode, they are used as spooky monster villains, drawn in ways that turn real Chinese cultural traditions into cheap Halloween cartoon monsters. That kind of use of real folklore without any respect for what it means to real people is exactly the kind of cultural appropriation that has been criticized over and over again in recent years. There are also stereotype scenes involving Chinese food. In one bit, Shaggy tries to eat with chopsticks and cannot figure out how to hold them. He fumbles. He drops food everywhere. He gets rice stuck in his hair. He complains that he wishes they had normal American forks. The whole scene is meant to be funny. It is meant to show how out of his element Shaggy is in a Chinese restaurant. But the way it is played, it also sends the message that Chinese eating traditions are strange and silly and inferior to American ones. That kind of message, packaged in a light little cartoon gag, is exactly how casual racism gets fed to little kids without them even knowing what they are being fed. The fireworks scenes in the episode are another problem. Fireworks are a real Chinese cultural tradition that go back thousands of years. Real Chinese people invented fireworks. Real Chinese festivals use fireworks in beautiful and meaningful ways. And in this Scooby-Doo episode, the fireworks are used as a source of comedic chaos. Rockets shoot off in all directions. Spinning wheels of fire go rolling down the streets. Firecrackers explode inside the gang's clothes and shoes. The whole thing is played as a wild, wacky mess, and there's no acknowledgement anywhere in the episode that fireworks are actually a real and important part of a real culture. They are just treated as another exotic prop for a spooky adventure. The way the ghost of Zen 2-0 is finally unmasked at the end of the episode adds another layer of trouble. Without giving away the whole reveal, the bad guy turns out to be someone who is using the Chinese ghost story to steal valuable objects for himself. That is fine on its own, but nowhere in the story does anyone stop to say that dressing up as a fake Chinese ghost is itself a bad thing to do. The whole moral of the story is just about catching a thief. The whole cultural appropriation angle, the whole use of racist yellow peril tropes, the whole exploitation of real Chinese folklore is just left completely untouched. The gang laughs. They celebrate. They drive off in the mystery machine, and the whole episode ends with no real reckoning about anything that happened in the previous 22 minutes. Cultural critics who have written about Mystery Mask mix-up over the years have almost universally called it the worst episode in the entire original Scooby-Doo run. Some have called it the worst episode of Scooby-Doo across the whole franchise, including all of the newer shows and movies. Some have said it is one of the most racist mainstream cartoons ever to air on a major American network. Some have argued that it should be pulled from streaming platforms entirely and locked away in a vault where no child ever has to see it again. And some have gone so far as to say that the episode should be included in film school curriculums as a warning example of how bad cartoon writing can get when nobody in the room is paying attention to what is actually being drawn and said. Asian American writers have been particularly hard on this episode in recent years. Many Asian American writers have spoken and written about how growing up watching cartoons like this one shaped the way that other kids in their neighborhood thought about them. Kids at school would pull the corners of their eyes back and speak with fake accents. Kids at school would make fun of the food that Asian American kids brought in their lunchboxes. Kids at school would call Asian American kids Fu Manchu or Zentuo, or worse. And a lot of those cruel schoolyard behaviors trace back, at least in part, to the fact that mainstream cartoon shows like Scooby-Doo were putting these exact stereotypes on the air for a whole generation of kids to soak up every Saturday morning. That is a heavy legacy for one 22-minute cartoon episode to carry. But that is the legacy of Mystery Mask Mix-Up. Streaming platforms have handled this episode differently in different places. Some services still carry it as part of the standard second season lineup. Some services have quietly removed it from their libraries without making any public statement. Some services have added a warning card at the start that mentions dated cultural depictions, and some services have kept the episode available but have edited out the worst scenes, cutting out the buck teeth disguises and the wook wyke lines and the fake accents. All of these different responses show that the industry knows the episode is a problem, but nobody wants to be the one to make the big call. Nobody wants to officially say that the episode is banned, because pulling one episode of a beloved classic show opens up a whole conversation about which other episodes should also be pulled. And that is a conversation that big streaming companies do not really want to have. The Scooby-Doo franchise has never revisited Mystery Mask Mix-Up in any of its later shows or movies. Nobody has ever tried to bring back the ghost of Zentuo as a returning villain. Nobody has ever made a sequel episode set in Chinatown. Nobody has ever put out a comic book or a video game that references the story. The whole episode has been quietly buried by the modern Scooby-Doo team, without any big announcement, without any public statement, without any explanation. It is just gone from the ongoing story. And that quiet burial is maybe the strongest signal of all, that the modern team knows this episode was a terrible mistake. They cannot officially ban it, but they can walk away from it and hope that the rest of the audience walks away too. There are a few defenders of the episode who have tried to argue over the years that it should not be judged by modern standards. They say that it was made in a different time. They say that nobody knew any better back then. They say that the writers were just following the same kind of stereotypes that were common in every cartoon of that era. Those defenders have a point about the historical context. It is true that a lot of cartoons in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s had similar problems. It is true that the culture as a whole was less sensitive to these kinds of harmful depictions, but those historical facts do not make the episode good. They do not make the stereotypes less harmful. They do not undo the damage that shows like this one did to a whole generation of kids. Understanding the history is important, but so is being honest about what we are looking at. And what we are looking at when we watch Mystery Mask Mix-Up today is a genuinely bad cartoon that hurt real people. For many longtime Scooby-Doo fans, this episode is a painful reminder that the show they love has some dark corners that they wish did not exist. Scooby-Doo is a franchise built on fun. It is a franchise built on friendship. It is a franchise built on courage and cleverness and teamwork. Those are the good things about Scooby-Doo. Those are the things that have kept fans coming back for over 5 decades. But this episode is a reminder that even the shows we love can have episodes we should not celebrate. It is a reminder that we can enjoy something while also being honest about its flaws. It is a reminder that being a fan of something does not mean you have to defend everything it has ever done. And it is a reminder that the best way to love a classic show is to acknowledge where it went wrong and to demand that its future be better than its past. Mystery Mask Mix-Up sits at the top of our list today because it packs more harmful content into one single episode than any other Scooby-Doo show of the whole classic run. It has the worst villain design. It has the worst dialogue. It has the worst disguises. It has the worst cultural appropriation. It has the worst musical stereotypes. It has the worst physical comedy. And it has the worst overall tone. Everything about it, from top to bottom, is a masterclass in what a cartoon should never do. And that is why, if you're looking for one single Scooby-Doo episode that would absolutely, positively, 100% never air today, in its original form, this is the one. This is the #1 banned Scooby-Doo scene of all time. Those are the 10 Scooby-Doo scenes from the original 1969 series that have been quietly buried, softly banned, or loudly called out over the years. Some of these episodes still air today with no warning at the start. Some have been carefully edited so that the worst scenes never reach modern young viewers. Some have been hidden from the front pages of streaming rotations, tucked away in the back of the library where casual fans are unlikely to stumble across them. But all of them tell us something about how much TV has changed since Scooby-Doo first rolled up in the Mystery Machine on that early autumn Saturday morning back in 1969. Watching the original run of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You Today is a mixed bag. On the one hand, there is real joy in it. There is the friendship between Fred and Daphne and Velma and Shaggy and Scooby. There is the smart mystery solving that inspired generations of kids to think like detectives. There is the goofy humor and the silly running gags and the timeless moment when Fred says the words, "Let us split up, gang." Those are the things that made Scooby-Doo one of the most beloved cartoon franchises in the whole history of American animation. Those are the things that keep the show alive and running and making new fans every single year, more than 50 years after that first episode aired. But on the other hand, there's the stuff we have talked about today. The stereotypes, the slurs, the scenes that feel wrong now, even though they might have felt normal back then. The moments when the writers just did not think or did not care about how their words and pictures would land on people who were not like them. Those moments are part of the show too, and pretending they are not there does not help anybody. Not the kids watching for the first time today, not the fans who have loved the show for decades, not the creators trying to make new stories that are better than what came before. Talking about the hard parts of a beloved thing is one of the best ways to make sure that the next version of that thing is even better than the last one. So the question we want to leave you with today is this: what do you think should happen to episodes like the ones we have talked about? Should streaming services pull them from their libraries entirely and lock them away in a vault where no child ever has to see them again? Should they stay available with a warning card at the start, like the ones that play before some old Warner Brothers cartoons? Should they be quietly edited so that the worst scenes are trimmed out while the rest of the story stays intact? Or should they be left completely alone, aired the way they were made, so that viewers can see them exactly as they were and make up their own minds? There is no easy answer, and different Scooby-Doo fans have very different feelings about the right thing to do. Which of these 10 scenes shocked you the most? Was it the pilot that almost got Scooby-Doo pulled off the air before it even started, with its walking suit of dead man's armor and its foggy museum full of shadows? Was it the haunted mansion full of green ghost phantoms and hidden bodies tied up in secret rooms? Was it the rogue robot at the shut-down amusement park, with its glowing eyes and its clamp hands closing in on Velma while she was trapped in a runaway bumper car? Was it the rampaging ape man on the fake movie set, with all of the awful old Jungle movie tropes packed into a single 22-minute cartoon? Was it the Snow Ghost episode with its stereotyped Tibetan lodge owner and its lumped-together cultural references? Was it Miner 49er in the ghost town, with his hollow skull face and his creepy laugh echoing off the canyon walls? Was it the Mummy that turned people to stone, with its treatment of ancient Egypt as a spooky playground for American teenagers? Was it Bedlam in the Big Top with its little person character called by a slur every other minute? Was it the Ghost of Geronimo in the Pueblo cliff dwelling with its scalping jokes and its pale face lines? Or was it the big one at #1? The Chinatown episode with the buck teeth disguises and the wook-like accents, and the Fu Manchu villain that has to be seen to be believed? Drop your thoughts down in the comments section below. We read every single one, and we love hearing which classic cartoon moments hit hardest for you. If you have a favorite childhood memory of watching Scooby-Doo, tell us about it. If you have a memory of an episode that scared you as a kid, tell us about that too. If you have thoughts about how streaming services should handle these old shows going forward, We want to hear those as well. This is the kind of conversation that gets better when more voices join in. So bring your take, share your story, and let us all figure this stuff out together. If you enjoyed this trip down the darker side of memory lane, please hit that like button. Every like helps our channel grow. Every like tells the algorithm that people like you want to see more deep dives into the classic cartoons that shaped so many childhoods. And if you want more videos exactly like this one, click subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. We have got a whole vault full of deep dives into your favorite old shows, banned scenes, hidden secrets, and cartoon controversies that never got the attention they deserved. There is always something new coming. There is always another story to tell, and we would love to have you along for the ride. Until next time, remember to stay curious, stay kind, and keep on solving the mysteries of the world around you. And if you ever find yourself lost in a fog on a dark country road and you see something spooky moving through the trees, do us all a favor. Do not follow it into the abandoned museum. Do not go looking for the ghost. Just call the gang, because if there is one thing we learned from watching Scooby-Doo all these years, it is that every single monster in this world, no matter how scary he looks, always turns out to be somebody in a mask. And meddling kids will always figure it out in the end.